Do 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 do.
Do 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 do.
בראשית ברא אלוהים את השמיים ואת הארץ. בראשית ברא אלוהים את השמיים ואת הארץ, והארץ הייתה תוהו ובוהו וחושך על פני תהום, והארץ הייתה תוהו ובוהו וחושך על פני תהום,
ורוח אלוהים
מרחפת על פני המים, ורוח אלוהים מרחפת על פני המים.
בראשית ברא אלוהים
את השמיים
ואת הארץ. בראשית
ברא אלוהים את השמיים ואת הארץ, והארץ הייתה תוהו ובוהו וחושך על פני תהום, והארץ הייתה תוהו ובוהו וחושך על פני תהום,
ורוח אלוהים מרחפת על פני המים,
ורוח אלוהים מרחפת על פני המים.
Try singing along with us. Do 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 do.
And we're Hindei matov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hindei matov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hindei matov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hinei matov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. How good it is, how sweet it is to be together on this day. Shabbat Shalom, good morning. Good morning from our lovely sunny sanctuary here in Northwood. To all of you here who joined us here in the sanctuary, and a big thank you to Shirley for tea and coffee before the service as well. But also a big welcome, of course, to all of you wherever you are joining us from. It's lovely to see Rabbi Aaron joining us from Athens. He's there to do a wedding in Athens, so it's lovely to have you with us. And everyone from Lincoln and all around that you're joining us. So we wrap ourselves in a mantle of community. If you wear a talit and you would like to put that on now, then do so as we recite together the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Asher kideshanu b'mitzvotav vetzivanu lehitatef batzitzit. On page 112. If you would like to stand, please do so.
Eternal God, a mystery surrounds my life. What came before it and what lies beyond it are shrouded in darkness. But in the darkness is your presence, and in the mystery your love. No mind can grasp the splendor of your being, no tongue express the majesty of your works. Yet there are times when we sense a reality that is beyond our mortal sight. May this Sabbath be such a time for us. Help us to hear your voice, to find your image in our souls, and to be at peace.
Elohai, Elohai, neshama, shenatata bi tahorahi, atabarata, atayatzata, atanafachta bi, ve'ata Shamra Bakirbi, Elohai, Elohai, Neshama, Shenatata bi tahorahi.
You may be seated. I apologize, I was miss on the stage instructions. My God, the soul that you have given me is pure. You created it, formed it, and breathed it into me, and you sustain it within me. So long as there is a soul within me, I will give thanks to you, Eternal One, my God and God of my ancestors, Sovereign of all worlds, Guide of every human soul. We praise you, O God, in whose hands are the souls of all the living, and the spirits of all flesh.
Baruch she'amar v'haya olam, Baruch Hu. We praise you, our God, sovereign of the universe, worshipped by your people, lauded and glorified by those who love and serve you. With songs of praise we extol you and proclaim your sovereignty, sole source of the life of all worlds. Baruch atah Adonai, melech ha'amol b'tishbachot.
And a passage by Judah Halevi. To you the stars of morning sing, from you their radiance bright did spring, and steadfast in their vigils day and night, your angels flooded with fervor ring your praise. They teach the holy ones to bring into your house the breath of early light.
The heavens declare the glory of God.
The sky proclaims God's handiwork.
Day unto day utters speech.
Night unto night teaches knowledge.
Yet there is no speech, there are no words.
Not a sound of them is heard.
And still their call goes out to all the earth.
And a message to the end of the world.
God's teaching is perfect.
Reviving the soul.
God's word is unfailing.
Making wise the simple.
God's precepts are right.
Delighting the mind.
God's commandments are clear.
Enlightening the eyes.
God's doctrine is pure.
Enduring forever.
God's guidance is true.
And altogether just.
They are more to be desired than gold, than any amount of fine gold.
Sweeter than honey from the honeycomb.
Your servant pays heed to them.
For in keeping them much depends.
Who is aware of errors?
Cleanse me therefore of unconscious sins.
Hold back your servant also from willful sins.
Let him not control me.
Then I shall be blameless.
And innocent of grave transgression. Iule ratzonim refi, vehegion libi lefanecha Adonai tzuri vegoali.
Nimm smirot v'shirim erog, ki elecha nafshi tarog, נפשי בצל ידיך לדעת רצותיך מדי דברי בכבודך ומליבי אל דודיך ירוב נפשי עליך כי נפשי תרוב אליך.
Would you please turn to page 135? Page 135. We rise.
Oh, et Adonai, Hamevorav, Baruch, Adonai, Hamevorav, Hamevorav, Le'olam va'ed.
Praise be the one to whom our praise is due. We praise the Eternal One, to whom our praise is due forever. May be seated.
We praise you, Eternal One, our God, Sovereign of the universe, Maker of light and creator of darkness, Author of peace and creator of all things. In your mercy, you give light to the earth and all who live on it, and in your goodness, you renew creation continually, day by day. How manifold are your works, O God! With wisdom have you made them all. The world is full of your creations. Your handiwork proclaims your praise. The radiant star bear witness to your glory. Baruch atah Adonai, Yotzei Hamarot.
Ahava rabba ahavtanu Adonai Eloheinu. Chemla gdola v'terachamalt aleinu. Avinu malkeinu, ba'avur avotenu shabatechu v'cha. ותלמדנו חוקי חיים, כן תכוננו ותלמדנו. ותן בליבנו להבין ולהשכיל, לשמוע, ללמוד וללמד, לשמור ולעשות ולקיים את כל דברי תורתך באהבה. והאר עינינו בתורתך, ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך, ויחד לבבינו לאהבה וליראה את שמך. כי בנו בחרת לייחדך באהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני, הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה. Would you please rise? שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד.
Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam va'ed.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. You may be seated.
למען תזכרו, ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני, אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני, אדוני אלוהיכם.
Good and beautiful and true, sound, established and enduring are these words, now and forever. True it is, Eternal One, that you are our sovereign God and Redeemer, as you were the God and Redeemer of our ancestors. You are our Maker, the rock of our salvation, We have known you always as our helper and our liberator. There is no God but you. Truly you are first and you are last. We have no redeemer but you. You redeemed us from Egypt and freed us from the house of bondage. Then, with great joy, Moses, Miriam, and all Israel sang to you this song.
Song the redeemed sang to your name at the shore of the sea. With one accord they gave thanks and proclaimed your sovereignty.
Adonai, Imlo, Leolam Baed. Adonai, Imlo, Leolam Baed. Zu Israel, Kuma Israel, Koleinu Adonai, Sevaot Shemo, Kadosh Israel, Baruch atah Adonai, Kol Israel, Kol Israel, Israel.
Please rise. Adonai sfatai tiftach, ufi yagid tehilatecha.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim v'Koneh Hakol, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם בעזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מזריח השמש ומוריד הטל.
Mahakel Chaim B'Chesed Machayei Meitim B'Rachamim Rabim Somech Noflim Umatir Asorim Umkayem Emenato L'Shanei Afar Mi Chamocha Bagavurot Umi Domela Mahayeh Umahatzmiach Yeshua.
למען אתה לחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי המתים. נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך.
קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוך כל הארץ,
כבודו מלא עולם.
ברוך כבוד אדוני,
ממקומך מלכנו תופיע ותמלוך עלינו, כי מחכים אנחנו לך.
ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור, hallelujah.
From generation to generation, we will make known your greatness. To the end of time, we will proclaim your holiness. Your praise, O God, our God, shall never depart our lips. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el hakadosh.
Please be seated.
ישמחו במלכותך, ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי שבת וקוראי עונג. המקדשי שביעי, המקדשי שביעי, כולם יספרו ויתענגו מטובך, והשביעי רצית בו וקידשתו, והשביעי רצית בו וקידשתו. חמדת ימים אותו קראת, זכר למעשה בראשית.
Our God and God of our ancestors, may our rest on this day be pleasing in your sight. Sanctify us by your commandments and make us loyal to your teaching. Satisfy us with your goodness, gladden us with your salvation, and purify our hearts to serve you in truth. In your gracious love, Eternal One, let the holiness of your Sabbath enter our hearts, and may all Israel who hallow your name be exalted by its peace. We praise you, O God, for the holiness of the Sabbath.
רוצה אדוני אלוהינו בעמך ישראל, ותפילתם באהבה תקבל, ותהי לרצון תמיד עבודת ישראל עמך. ברוך אתה אדוני, שאותך לבדך, בירה נעבוד. מודים אנחנו לך, שאתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו לעולם ועד. צור חיינו, מגן אישנו, אתה הוא לדור ודור. נודה לך ונספר תהילתך, על חיינו המסורים בידיך, ועל נשמותינו הפקודות לך, ועל ניסיך שבכל יום עמנו, ועל נפלותיך וטובותיך שבכל עת ערב ובוקר וצהריים. ברוך אתה אדוני, הטוב שמך, ולך נאה להודות.
שים שלום, שים שלום, שים שלום, טובה וברכה, הם בחסד ורחמים עלינו, ועל כל ישראל עמך. שים שלום, שים שלום.
As we are joined by our Ukrainian twin congregation, Congregation Teva, we pray together. Grant peace, welfare and blessing, grace, love and mercy to us and to all Israel, your people. As a loving parent, bless us with the light of your presence. For by the light of your presence, eternal God, you have revealed to us the law of life, a love of kindness and righteousness, blessing and mercy, life and peace. For it is good in your sight that your people Israel and all peoples be blessed at all times with your gift of peace. We praise you, O God, the source of peace. We'll pause for some silent prayer.
All say shalom bimrama. Oh, say shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol bnei Adam.
We now turn to page 490, for Kriyat HaTorah, the reading of Torah. And if I could invite our Ark openers to join us. So we have Marion, and we need one more. Sandra, would you mind also helping us with the opening of the Ark? Thank you. So we're on page 490. Take your time, no rush. Assemble the people, men, women, and children, and the strangers in your cities, to hear and learn to revere the Eternal One, your God, and observe faithfully all the precepts of this Torah. And let their children who do not yet know it hear, that they too may learn to revere the Eternal One, your God. Please rise.
V'ha'einenu b'toratecha, v'dabek libeinu b'mitzvotecha, v'yached levavenu le'ahava u'yira et shemecha.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo.
Gadlu l'Adonai ti, uneromamo shemo yachdav.
Lecha Adonai, HaGadola, v'HaGavura, v'HaTifer, v'HaNetz, v'HaHod, ki hod b'shamayim u'va'aretz. Lecha Adonai ha'mamlecha v'ha'mitnaseh, lecha la'rosh.
You may all be seated. And it's lovely that Ali is leading the service with me, and she's also going to be reciting the Torah blessings. So we're going to invite Ali to come into the center. If you can bring your book. And so we will be reading. Ali's home shul is a Reform synagogue, so I don't know if your custom is to kiss the text, and I thought it might be.
Sorry. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMavorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMavorach leolam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMavorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam. Asher b'chabanu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen. And if we could have the Torah come, that would be fabulous. Fantastic. So we are going to read two sections from our Torah portion, Bahalotcha, today. They're not really connected, but I wanted to read, because I'm going to read I'm going to speak about in my sermon about the section. I wanted to read the section, which if you look at the scroll, you will be able to see there's something interesting going on here. It's a passage that is connected by or framed by two inverted or really mirror image nuns. Now this is these inverted nuns, or the mirror image nuns, appear 9 times in total in the Tanakh. Only in these two cases here in our portion, in the Torah itself, the other occurrences, I think, are Psalm 107, although do correct me if I got the number wrong. It's in a psalm that these inverted nuns appear. It's a rather interesting scribal thing. Nobody quite knows why it's there. We know it's ancient. The Talmud discusses it. One of the suggestions the Talmud says is that it is because the text is in the wrong place. It's not really supposed to be here. If you want to look in your Chumash, where it's chapter 10, verse 35, 36, in the Chumash, that's on page 960. So because the Talmud says it might be that it's in the wrong place, I thought I could take the liberty of reading those two verses and then reading chapter 12, which is a much more interesting story than just reading on from this section. So maybe it's in the wrong place. The other suggestion that the Talmud brings is that this number of letters, so if you count the letters, and you'll be able to do that while I read, although I'll tell you now, there are 85 letters in between the two inverted nuns, is the shortest passage necessary for a sacred text to be treated as a sacred piece of paper. So if you only put 20 letters on a piece of paper, you don't have to treat it as sacred yet. Oh, they've zoomed in. Oh, look at this. That is very exciting. Here you can see the inverted nun, and there again. Thank you so much, Aaron. This is the magic of having a young, talented lad in our tech cupboard. So this length of section is the shortest text passage that we need in order for the text to be sacred. So we'll be reading those two verses, and those of you who are regularly go to Reform synagogues or Orthodox synagogues will recognize the text from the Torah service. It is traditionally also sung as we open the Ark and remove the scroll from the Ark. And then we'll be moving to chapter 12 and read there from verse 1, the story that Michael talked about in last night's sermon, the story of Miriam and Aaron gossiping about Moses and his wife. So we're going to do a bit of jumping around, but I thought it's worthwhile pointing this out. So chapter 10, verse 35. Vayehi ben soa Aaron, vayomer Moshe. And it was when the ark would set out, when the ark would go move on to a journey, Moses would say, Kuma Adonai, rise up, get up, God. Vayafutsu oivecha, scatter your enemies. Veyanusu mesanecha mipanecha, that those who hate you must flee from you. Uvenucha yomar, and when the ark, the ark is Aharon is feminine. When the ark would rest, would come to a standstill, Yomar, Moses would say, Shuva Adonai, rivavot alfei Yisrael. Return, God. Don't run away from us. Don't keep moving while we're resting. Return to us. Stay here with us. You, God, who are the God of the myriad thousands of Israel. It's a rather interesting passage. The reason we don't use it in liberal Judaism is probably quite obvious. It's not the most peaceful passage to think about when taking out the Torah, because really it talks about vayafutzu oivecha, scatter our enemies. So now we're going to go to the story of Miriam in chapter 12, and this is the ending of Parashat Ba'alotcha. ותדבר מרים ואהרון במשה על אודות האישה הכושית, אשר לקח, כי אישה כושית לקח. And Miriam and Aaron spoke up against Moses, or on to Moses, on account of the Cushite woman which he had taken in marriage. For he had taken a Cushite woman in marriage. So if you want to know what's going on here, you need to listen to Michael's sermon from last night. ויאמרו הרק אך במשה דיבר אדוני, הלא גם בנו דיבר, וישמע אדוני. And they said, did God only speak to Moses? Didn't he also speak to us or through us? And the Eternal One heard it. והאיש משה עניו מאוד. But the man Moses was very humble. Mikol ha'adam asher al pnei ha'adama. He was, in fact, the most humble amongst all the people who were upon the earth. So he doesn't speak up against his siblings when they say, well, why are you singling out Moses here? Vayomer Adonai, and the Eternal One spoke, Pitom el Moshe ve'el Aharon ve'el Miriam. And God spoke very suddenly to Moses, to Aaron, and to Miriam, or not suddenly, maybe right away. Go out, you three of you, El Ohel Moed, to the tent of meeting. Vayetzu shloshtam, and the three of them went out. Vayered Adonai ba'amud anan, and the Eternal One descended in a pillar of cloud. El Ohel vayamod petach ha'ohel, and God stood in the entrance to the tent. Vayikra Aharon uMiriam, vayetzu shnehem. And God called out to Aaron and Miriam, and the two came out. Vayomer Shim'una devarai. And God said, listen now to what I have to say. Im yihye neviachem Adonai memar'eh elav ve'et vada v'chalom edaber lo. I lost my line. Vayomer divarai im yihye neviachem Adonai memar'eh elav et vada v'chalom. So when I speak, when prophecy, the prophecy of the Eternal One is extended, and I shall make myself seen, I appear in a dream. Adaber bo lo chen avdi Moshe. But it is not such with my servant Moses. Bechol beiti ne'aman hu pe el pe edaber bo. In his case, in every case that I speak to him face to face. Umar'eh velo bechidat utmunat Adonai yabid. And only he can behold my likeness. Umadua lo yaretem ledaber be'avdi be'Moshe. And you shall not. Now, how dare you speak up against my servant Moses? Vayicha af Adonai bam. And the anger of God rose up against them. So God gets really angry. So he chastises them and gets really angry. Vayelech v'anan sar me'ohel moed. And God storms off. And the cloud rises, disappears from the tent of meeting. Vehine Miriam metzora'at kesheleg. And behold, Miriam was stricken with this disease, tzara'at, which sometimes is incorrectly translated as leprosy. It's not the same thing as leprosy. It's a scaly rash that is, as it says, kesheleg, snow-like. So it's a white rash. Vayifen Aharon el Miriam, and Aaron turned towards Miriam. Vehine metzora'at, and behold, he saw that she was stricken with tzara'at. Vayomer Aharon el Moshe, and Aaron said to Moses, Bi Adoni, al na tesh te aleinu, aleinu chatata, asher nolenu, va'asher chatanu. So Aaron now goes to beg forgiveness of Moses and say, behold, we have, forgive us for our sin, for we have sinned. Al na tihye kim'at asher b'tzetenu merechem imo. That we may, let us not can be like as if we are met, as if we are dead, or as if we have emerged dead from our mother's womb. Vayachel chetzi b'zaro, that half of the flesh of or Miriam's flesh shall be eaten. Vayitzak Moshe el Adonai lemor, and Moses cried out to the Eternal One, saying, and this is a really famous passage, Elna refana la, heal, please God, heal her now. It's the one prayer for healing that we hear in the Torah. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe, and the Eternal One said to Moses, Va'aviha yarok yarak befaneha, halo techalem shivat yamim, tesager shivat yamim michutz lamachaneh. And then God says to Moses this rather troubling sentence, if her father had spat in her face, surely she shall be banished for 7 days. She shall be excluded from the camp for 7 days. Ve'achar te'asev, and after that, only after that she shall be readmitted. Vatiskor Miriam michutz lamachaneh, and Miriam was excluded from the encampment from outside the encampment for 7 days. V'ha'am lo nasa ad he'asef Miriam, and the people did not travel further until Miriam was readmitted. So they didn't leave her behind. So they showed solidarity at least. They stayed with her. V'achar nas'u ha'am michatzorat vayachanu b'midbar Paran. And only after she was admitted, they the people journeyed on from Chetzarot, and they settled in the wilderness of Paran.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech ha'olam, asher natan lanu torat emet, v'chayei olam notar b'tachenu. Baruch atah Adonai, noten ha'torah.
Amen. And would you please rise?
Mamu Adonai Eloheinu v'hishtachavo l'ha'kodsho. Ramamu Adonai Eloheinu v'hishtachavo l'ha'kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu Ramamu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu Ramamu. Ramamu Adonai Eloheinu v'hishtachavo l'ha'kodsho.
Wonderful, and you may all be seated. We turn to our Haftarah. It's not the traditional Haftarah, because the traditional Haftarah really didn't seem all that relevant to the sections that we read. Although there is, in all the options that were given, there's always a reference to Zion, which seems very appropriate at the moment, because we're about to embark tomorrow on our Ark Synagogue trip to Israel. But the passage that I've chosen is from the book of Jeremiah, chapter 31. And the reason I've chosen it is it does both this referencing of Zion as in the traditional portion, in Haftarah portion, but it also references that we shall once again take up your timbrels. And the timbrels normally we associate with Miriam, so it seemed like a good link to our story. And Mark will come and read the Haftarah blessings for us.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bacha b'nevi'im tovim, v'ratza b'devreihem hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai, habocher b'Torah u'v'Moshe avdo ובישראל עמו ובנביאי האמת והצדק.
Amen. And Michael.
As Rabbi Lee has already said, the Haftarah reading today is from Jeremiah chapter 31, verses 1 to 9. At that time, declares the Eternal One, I will be God to all the clans of Israel, and they shall be my people. Thus said the Eternal One. The people escaped from the sword and found favor in the wilderness. When Israel was marching homeward, the Eternal One revealed himself to me of old. Eternal love I conceived for you then, therefore I continue my grace to you. I will build you firmly again, O maiden Israel. Again you shall take up your timbrels and go forth to the rhythm of the dancers. Again you shall plant vineyards on the hills of Samaria. Men shall plant and live to enjoy them, for the day is coming when watchmen shall proclaim on the heights of Ephraim, come, let us go up to Zion, to the Eternal One our God. For thus said the Eternal One, cry out in joy for Jacob, shout at the crossroads of the nations, sing aloud in praise and say, save, O Eternal One, your people, the remnants of Israel. I will bring them in from the northland, gather them from the ends of the earth, the blind and the lame among them, those with child and those in labor. In a vast throng they shall return here. They shall come with weeping, and with compassion will I guide them. I will lead them to streams of water, by a level road where they will not stumble. For I am ever a father to Israel. Ephraim is my firstborn.
Beautiful, thank you.
ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, צור כל העולמים, צדיק בכל הדורות, האל הנאמן, האומר ועושה, המדבר ומקיים, שכל דבריו אמת וצדק. על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום השבת הזה, שנתת לנו, אדוני אלוהינו, לקדושה ולמנוחה, לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל, אדוני אלוהינו, אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך. יתברך שמך בפי כל חי, תמיד לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, מקדש השבת.
Shakoach. And if I could invite Mark and Michael to open the Ark for us, and I invite you to stand. We're on page 493. Eternal God, whose dominion embraces the universe, we ask your blessing for our Sovereign Lady, Queen Elizabeth, and all the royal family, for those who govern our country and all who influence the quality of our national life. Make them conscious of their responsibility and teach them to exercise it in accordance with your will. May we all help to fashion this country a society that excels in freedom and justice, tolerance and compassion, so that it might be a force for righteousness and peace in the life of humanity.
May the one who blessed our ancestors bless all our brothers and sisters of the house of Israel who enter synagogues to pray and to give aid to those in need. May the Holy One, to whom all praise is due, hear their prayers and help them to fulfill their aspirations for good.
Eternal God, our rock and redeemer, grant blessing to the state of Israel, created to fulfill an age-old dream and to be a haven for the oppressed. Inspire its leaders and citizens with faithfulness to the aims of its founders, to develop the land for the benefit of all its inhabitants, and to implement the prophetic ideals of liberty and justice. May they live in harmony with their neighbors and cause to come true once more the ancient vision that out of Zion shall go forth Torah and the word of God from Jerusalem. Yihalelu et Shem Adonai, ki nizgav shemo levado.
Hodo al eretz v'shamayim, v'yarem keren le'amo, tehila l'chol hasitav, libnei Yisrael am koravo. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah.
Lift up your heads, O gates. Lift yourselves up, O ancient doors. Let a glorious sovereign enter. Who is this glorious sovereign? The eternal one, God of the hosts of heaven, is truly the glorious sovereign. This is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel in time to come, says the eternal one. I will put my teaching within them and engrave it on their hearts. I will be their God, and they shall be my people. No longer shall anyone need to teach a friend or a neighbor to know me, for they shall all know me, young and old alike.
Shivedo Adonai Elecha v'nashuva Hadesh Yameh Kekedem Hadesh Yameinu Kekedem, kekedem.
You may all be seated. Sometimes your mind takes you on a journey that grabs hold of you and keeps you hooked on exploring ever new paths. This is what has been happening to my mind ever since our wonderful Tikkun Leil Shavuot last Saturday night. Our theme, talking about Revelation, was explored by 4 rabbis from 4 very different angles. And if you've missed it, I encourage you to catch up on the short 20 to 30 minutes long sessions on our YouTube channel. In her wonderful presentation that evening, Rabbi Dr. Judith Rosenberry quoted a fascinating poem by the great Hebrew poet Leah Goldberg, published in her first anthology, Tabaot Ashan, Smoke Rings, in 1935. The poem is entitled, I Saw My God at the Cafe, and I will read it for you first in the Hebrew original, followed by the English translation prepared by Rabbi Professor Dahlia Marks. Et Elohai ra'iti bakafe, hu nitgala li b'ashan sigariyot, cheruach mistalech v'rafeh ramas li, od efshar lichiyot. הוא לא היה דומה לאהובי, קרוב ממנו ואומלל. צל שקוף של אור הכוכבים, הוא לא מילא את החלל. לאור שקיעה חיוור ואדמתם, כמתוודה על חטא לפני מותו. ירד למטה, לנשק רגלי אדם, ולבקש את סליחתו. I saw my God at the cafe. He revealed himself to me through cigarette smoke, gloomy, remorseful, and frail. He signaled me, life goes on. He did not look anything like my lover. He was closer than him and miserable, Like a translucent shadow of starlight, he hardly filled the void. To a pale reddish twilight, as if confessing a sin before death, he kneeled down to kiss the feet of man and to beg his forgiveness. You will have to catch up on Judith's session to get a more complete take on the poem. For today, I want to just pick up on the Hebrew word for revelation, hitgalut. As Judith pointed out to us, and I'm not sure why I never noticed this before, the word shares the same root as the Hebrew word for exile or diaspora, galut. In many ways, the linguistic link makes perfect sense in the context of the biblical narrative. Revelation occurs in exile or in diaspora, during the Israelites' wandering in the wilderness at Mount Sinai, or in Ezekiel's case, during the Babylonian exile. On the other hand, this is rather extraordinary, as the idea of exile is not necessarily seen always in a positive light. As the historian Professor Isaiah Gaffney brilliantly demonstrates, after the destruction of the Second Temple, the Jews have interpreted galut, exile or diaspora, in various ways, among them notably as a punishment, as a blessing, or as a universal mission. According to Professor Norman Cohen, the first two reactions to the catastrophe of the destruction of the temple were epitomized by the emergence of two antagonistic notions within rabbinic literature. The notion of histalkut hashchina, according to which the presence of God had abandoned the Jews, and the opposed notion of shchina begalut, which as early as the 2nd century emphasized the fact that God was suffering with its people and that the Shekhinah was exiled too. As the sociologist Professor Stéphane Dufoy points out, their coexistence within Jewish thought can also be understood as an internal and fundamental tension in the conception of galut. Galut is both, and at the same time, at the same time a malediction and a blessing. Being dispersed was also a promise. The promise that God, who had scattered them for their sins, would also gather the dispersed at the end of times. The end of Galut, i.e. the return of the Shekhinah and of the Jews to the land, had to be interpreted by the rabbis as an eschatological horizon, therefore neatly connecting theologically another interesting linguistic link, namely that the Hebrew word for redemption, geulah, depending on which interpretation you take of the roots, can also share the same root as revelation, exile, and diaspora. As we are embarking tomorrow on our Ark Synagogue Israel trip, it is not surprising that as I was reflecting on the meaning of galut, exile, or diaspora, my mind wandered to the modern Israeli understanding of the term. With the birth of the Chovevei Tzion movement in Zionism, best known through the writings of Moses Hess, Leo Pinsker, Theodor Herzl, and Achad Ha'am, we witness a complete denial of one dimension of the religious conception of galut. Galut is an exile that expects return, but the time of the return is understood differently. In this Zionist vision, the return only depends on human action, on migration to the land, and on the creation of a national state. The notion of shlilat hagalut, the negation of exile, is absolutely central for these early Zionist thinkers, as they stress the necessity to move away from the curse and the dereliction of exile. As we can read it in Herzl's The Jewish State, and I quote Herzl, "I think the Jews will always have sufficient enemies, such as every nation has. But once fixed in their own land, it will no longer be possible for them to scatter all over the world. The diaspora cannot be reborn unless the civilization of the whole earth should collapse. And such a consummation could be feared by none but foolish men. Following the founding of the State of Israel, with Zionist thinkers realizing that not all Jews living in the diaspora were going to leave their homes behind and come on mass aliyah, mass immigration to Israel, we see the emergence in 1948 of a new term for the diaspora, tfutzot. It is the term of choice for Israelis who reject the disparaging view of diaspora Jews held by some Zionists, as is evidenced in heated debates about terminology at the World Zionist Organization, even today. You have no idea the hours of arguments we spent about tfutzot or galut. The word tfutzot is related to a verb found in this week's Torah portion, and it is in that famous passage between the inverted nuns, Vayafutzu oivecha, and God shall scatter your enemies. Not exactly a particularly positive image of how we Jews have ended up scattered around the world, though maybe historically rather accurate. And yet, having reflected for the past week on the fascinating connection between galut, exile, hitgalut, revelation, and geulah, redemption, I wonder if the time has come for us as progressive religious Zionists to re-embrace the term galut when we refer to the diaspora in Hebrew. There is such a rich Jewish tradition of seeing galut as an expression of blessing and potential. Why should we let the early Zionists take that away from us? So I would love to hear your thoughts on this, and we'll report back on what my Israeli friends have to say about my musings. Shabbat Shalom. I invite you now to turn to page 520, the Aleinu. Please rise. Aleinu לשבח לאדון הכל,
לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, אשר שם חלקנו ייחד את שמו, וגור עלינו להמליך מלכותו, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד הארץ, ומשב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובי מרומים, הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, ידעת היום והשבות אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחתינו, ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
As we worship before you, O God, we think of those who once shared with us the joys and burdens of life, and who are no longer in our midst. The sorrow of bereavement is softened by the bond of love which continues to unite us with our dear ones, and by our cherished memories of them, which we will always carry in our hearts. May all that was good in their lives remain with us as an influence for good. O God, grant consolation to those who are in sorrow, and light to those in darkness. Teach us at all times to put our trust in you and to praise your name. Before we recite Kaddish together on page 524, we recall the names of those whose yahrzeit falls at this time. Albert Frankel, the uncle of Sandra Lawson. Betty Ganellen, the mother of Marian Francis. Estelle Asserson, the mother of Ross Austin. Gerald Grossman, the father of Nigel. Lillian Carson, the mother of Philip and grandmother of Justin. Lily Windsor, the mother of Marion Dow. Samuel Dralish, the father of Gillian Ter-Hovanassian and grandfather of Greg and Sylvie. Tom Crosby, the husband of Irene, father of Peter and Catherine. Victor Colin, a friend of Joe Daniels and so many of us. And Yvonne G., a friend of our community. Zichronam livracha. May their memory be a blessing as we recite together. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, ba'alma divrach hirotei v'yamlich malchotei, b'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, v'galar v'zman kariv imru, amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'alam u'lalmei almaya, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו. לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יש לה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום. Aleinu ועל כל ישראל, ועל כל בני אדם, Imru, Amen. May great peace descend from heaven and abundant life be granted to us, to all Israel, to all those who mourn. Let us say, Amen. May be seated, and just to mention also that Elizabeth Walker is remembering Len Phillips. I'm sorry, I forgot that. Well, I didn't forget. I didn't get the message quick enough to say it before the Kaddish. We will be concluding today with Yom Zeh Yisrael, which you can find on page 644, and we invite you after that to join us in our Kiddush Zoom room. Do join us also at 5 o'clock today for Havdalah. It's always a wonderful occasion to just come together. It's on Zoom. If you don't have the Zoom link, just be in touch with me. You can stay for just 10 minutes, or you can chat for as long as you want. Some people stay for a very long time. Some people are just with us for 10 minutes. And next week, do come back into shul, come back online, as Rabbi Aaron is back on the bimah. And we look forward to welcoming back after... and we will help him with recovery by not allowing him to move any furniture. Just saying. It will be lovely to see him back on the bimah. I will be taking a holiday in Israel, so maybe I probably won't be with you on Shabbat morning because I'll be at the biennial conference of the Israeli Reform Movement next Shabbat, but maybe the following Shabbat I'll be able to be with you online as well. I don't think we have any other announcements that are really burning announcements. Do look out for what's going on in our weekly email. And for now, we're going to conclude with Yom Zeh Yisrael on page 644.
Yom Zeh Yisrael, Ora v'simcha, Shabbat benocha. Yom Zeh Yisrael, Ora v'simcha, Shabbat menucha. Shabbat menucha. Tzivita pekutim b'ma'at Sinai, Shabbat ולשמור לחושני, לערוך לפני מעשה ברוכה, שבת שבת מנוחה, שבת שבת מנוחה, יום זה לישראל אורה ושמחה, אורה ושמחה, שבת מנוחה, יום זה לישראל אורה ושמחה, שבת שבת מנוחה, שבת שבת מנוחה. חמדת הלבבות לאומה שבור, לפשט גחבת נשמה יתרה, מנפש מצרה יסיר הנחה, שבת שבת מנוחה, שבת שבת מנוחה, יום זה לישראל אורה ושמחה, אורה ושמחה, שבת מנוחה, יום זה לישראל אורה ושמחה, שבת שבת מנוחה, שבת שבת מנוחה. קידשת ברכת אותו מכל ימים, בששת גלית מלאכת עולמים, בו מצאו הגויים השקט וביתך, שבת שבת מנוחה, שבת שבת מנוחה, יום זה לישראל אורה ושמחה, אורה ושמחה, שבת מנוחה, יום זה לישראל אורה ושמחה, שבת שבת מנוחה, שבת שבת מנוחה.
And we welcome everyone in our Kiddush Zoom room, and we turn to the Kiddush. There is wine for all of you just at the back of the sanctuary, so if maybe somebody could just go and grab the tray. There's wine and juice for people, so we'll hand out some wine and juice. Lovely to see you, Aaron, and then I hope you get to enjoy Athens a bit. Is it very hot?
Yes, but there was a massive storm just before, so I was always going to be joining you anyway.
But you should enjoy Athens as well.
Yeah, I have had the opportunity to toughen in the Orthodox shul here and was called up for an aliyah, and that was all pleasant, but this service was just what I needed.
Well, we always love having you with us, of course. And we're going to sing V'shamru together while the wine is still coming round. I think Ali will need some on the bima as well. She doesn't have, I was amiss at giving you some. But let's sing together V'shamru. V'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, בורא פרי הגפן לחיים. And we say together over our challah, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz, b'te'avon, Shabbat shalom, goodbye to our